You're listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks, your source for centered and focused play therapy coaching.
Hi, I'm Dr. Brenna Hicks, the Kid Counselor. This is the Play Therapy Podcast where you get a masterclass in child-centered play therapy and practical support and application for your work with children and their families. In today's episode, I am answering a question from Suzanne in Maryland, and her question is about a 6-year-old client that has been dressing and undressing Barbies in each of his sessions. So we're going to talk through that. She's curious about the behavior, the theme, how to understand what's going on. So we're going to talk through that. But before we get into that, I just wanted to share with y'all what I consider to be a celebration, happy, joy moment. I looked at the emails that I've received in a very recent amount of time. I don't know the exact time frame, but know that it's been quite recent that I pulled all of these from. And I just wanted to give you the list of countries from whom I've received emails. And this says several things to me. Number one, there are CCPT practitioners literally all over the world, which makes my heart so happy. Number two, there are people working with children, therapists, counselors, clinicians working with children and wanting to do right by them in countries all over the world. And there are people listening to this podcast all over the world. So I'm just going to read you in this recent amount of time the emails or the countries from whom I've received emails. And I just want you to celebrate how CCPT is literally becoming something that every child, my hope is that every child will have access to. That is really one of my greatest ambitions, is that no matter where a child is in the world, that they will have access to a CCPT practitioner. So here are the countries: Taiwan, Iraq, Afghanistan, Singapore, Iran, South Africa, the Virgin Islands, India, Scotland, and New Zealand. And that's not comprehensive. That's not every country I've ever received an email from. That's just in a recent time span. The people that have reached out to me from those countries, listening to this podcast, fully engaged in CCPT and helping children all over the world. And many of these are countries that do not value children. They don't value freedom. They don't value autonomy. If you remember the question that I answered from India a couple weeks ago, she actually said in the email, culturally, this goes against everything that is normal. CCPT is something totally foreign culturally in India because they value obedience and compliance and structure and all of those things. So the freedom and autonomy that CCPT affords in some of these countries, children are not valued, independence and freedom are not valued, but yet there are practitioners that are providing this for kids because this is what kids need. It just makes me so happy. So I wanted to share that. Hopefully that makes you celebrate and makes you smile like it does me. Okay, so let me read parts of Suzanne's email and then I can dive into this a little bit and we'll talk through this together. She says, "Hi, Dr. Brenna. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. You're helping so many children and families with what you do." Thank you for that, Suzanne. "I have a question about a child that's 6 years old that I've been working with. I've had 3 sessions with him, and he plays with my Barbies, both male and female. And the only thing he does with them is dress and undress them from head to toe. He takes their clothes off and their shoes. He says he wants to find different clothes or outfits for them, but then puts on the same clothing. He does this with about 4 or 5 dolls. While doing this, he asks me to play popular music and we sing together while he dresses and undresses the dolls. He's excited to come to the playroom each week, but I don't understand this behavior and the theme that it falls under. I was thinking nurturing and caregiving, but I'm just not sure." Okay, so Suzanne in Maryland, thank you so much for the email. And let's talk through this because obviously 3 sessions in, it's very new. We're still in initiation. We're still in warm-up. And there's likely a lot going on just because this is a new experience. So I'm going to process that a little bit first, and then I'll dive into some other thoughts. So we know that when a child is in the initiation and warm-up, they are needing to build rapport and trust and relationship, connection, bond, all of those things. And often that means early on in the process, kids are not ready, willing, or able to dive into true work yet. because they still are trying to sort out what this is all about. And can I trust this person? And can I understand what this environment is all about? What do I actually need to work on? What do I inherently understand is an issue? Am I ready to do that? All of that. So there's all of these layers of insecurity and curiosity, sometimes also confusion when we know that we're that early into the process. So 3 sessions in, we recognize that often if a child does this kind of behavior, not necessarily dressing and undressing, but repetitive, very consistent play, it's safe. And it's a way of avoiding, not in a negative way, but it's a way of avoiding work. Because if I can undress and dress a doll for 50 minutes straight, 3 sessions in a row, I'm not forced to face anything else. I'm not forced to dive in deeper. I'm not forced to do anything that I'm going to be uncomfortable with. So early on, before a child goes through resistance, we know that they will sometimes do that kind of repetitive play because it's safe. We see this when kids come in and they gravitate toward art or drawing. We see this when kids come in and gravitate toward board games. These are safe types of play. And it makes sense because they need to feel secure and comfortable in a new environment with a new person, and they're not really sure what this whole playroom thing is all about. So we recognize 3 sessions in, that's likely part of it. It's just the stage and the phase in which he finds himself. However, I absolutely think that the fact that he is dressing and undressing dolls, that very much aligns with nurturing and caregiving. So I think you were on target with that hypothesis. But I also think that this is very ritualistic, because think about it. If over 50 minutes, he is taking clothes off, putting them on, taking clothes off, putting them on, taking clothes off, putting them on, that's ritualistic in nature. It's repetitive over and over, same type of action. We almost always can see that as self-soothing. This would be very similar to a child that lines up cars over and over and over again, or wiggles their fingers through the sand, making patterns, zigzags over and over and over again. That very consistent ritualistic type of behavior is almost always self-soothing. And you didn't indicate why this child is in therapy in the first place, but my gut, based on what you've told me, is there's probably really high levels of anxiety. And so self-soothing also makes sense, because if I can just do the same thing over and over again, there's some comfort in that ritualistic, kinesthetic action that just goes and goes and goes. It kind of is a grounding and self-soothing. Final thought, not related to your question specifically, but you mentioned that he asks me to play popular music. Okay. As a general rule, the playroom is a screen-free zone, which means we don't have phones, TVs, speakers, iPads, iPods, you name it. If it has a screen or if it's technologically driven, we don't have that in the playroom. So while I suppose maybe one could argue, well, if I'm child-centered and a child says, I want to listen to music, I need to comply with that request to a degree, but within boundaries. And a child-centered playroom is screen-free. Every time a child asks to bring a device back, every time a child asks for me to do something on my phone or play something on my phone or watch a video with them on my phone or any of those things, my response is always absolute on purpose. You really wish that we could blah, 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 or you would really like to blah, blah, blah. But the playroom is a screen-free zone. And here's why. This is also another reason why I think there's probably high levels of anxiety. I think even the music is self-soothing and it's grounding for this child. But music is distraction. Music is directive because there's lyrics and there's a beat and they can focus on that. There's all kinds of stuff that gets in the way of the work that the child truly needs to do. We want playrooms to be as neutral as possible. And anything prescriptive, including movies, or TV shows or videos or songs or any of those things, that can be a hindrance to the child actually doing the work. Now, I would argue that that is probably also self-soothing and avoidant, just like the dressing and undressing of the Barbies. And session 3, it all aligns. So we can understand the behavior. But Suzanne, just as a general rule, I would make sure that you let children know that screen-free zone means that music is not an option, but you can always give them the choice that they can choose to listen to music on the way home or on the way there or in the lobby or whatever the other options are, because we want to make sure that we honor the child's request, but that we adhere to the CCPT tenets and therefore the limits that are aligned with CCPT. All right, Suzanne, thank you so much for the email. I hope that that was helpful. And I hope that for all of you, as we go through these questions, I hope that it starts to give you insight and perspective when something very similarly happens in your playroom, that you're able to go, oh, okay, yeah, we talked about that on that one episode when so-and-so answered that question or asked that question. That's always the goal, is that there's some connection that's drawn from these questions to your own practice with your own kids. There's only so many things that happen in play sessions. There's only so many things that are going to emerge with kids in a playroom. So I think that the more questions that we're able to process together, the more you'll be able to start connecting things and make sense of what's going on, because we've already had discussions about similar topics. All right. Love y'all so much. If you want to reach out to me, please do Brenna@thekidcounselor.com. If you want to leave a voicemail question in the States, call 813-812-5525. We'll talk again soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks. For more episodes and resources, please go to www.playtherapypodcast.com.